Hello, welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague Adam Bexson. This week, we're going to talk about tax relief and investing in the UK. We also take a look at the rise of annuities and why that might be happening. And then we take a look at the DWP and communicating around state pension changes. Okay, Adam, first up, let's take a look at what Andy Haldane has been saying. So Andy Haldane is a name that will be known to many of our listeners, I'm sure. He used to be an economist at the Bank of England. He's currently, was it president of the Chamber of Commerce? Something.
Yeah, British Chambers of Commerce. Yeah, and he's been mentioned as an advisor to Andy Burnham as well. One of the things that he's been focused on this week and been headlines about it is tax relief, and making tax relief only available to savers prepared to invest in the UK. This comes back to something we talked about a while ago, which is really a pension is about that person. It's about building up a retirement income for that person, rather than it being used as a tool to manipulate and change economies. So driving forward the UK economy, we all want to see that. But actually, as a pension saver, should my fund be about me and my retirement income, or should it be about the British economy as a whole? And actually, when you take a step back and think about how this would actually work in practice, it starts to get really complex. Because I think one of the things that we often forget, when we're making contributions into pension plans, we're getting tax relief on those contributions going in. That's just a mechanism that's being used because we're going to be paying income tax when it comes out later. So what do we do then? If tax relief is only available to savers investing in the UK, does that mean if I'm investing outside of the UK that I don't pay income tax on my pension income later because I didn't get tax relief on the way in? It's really, really messy, and I think it's not really actually focused on savers. It's not really focused on the pensions, which is probably my biggest issue. And actually throwing into the mix as well, how you would actually measure it. So thinking about big companies listed in the UK, Shell springs to mind straight away. I know Andy's talking about funding gaps for SMEs, but that's an example of a company where they're investing, they're doing a lot of their work outside the UK, and there'll be companies at all levels which look into the similar kind of area as well.
Yeah, I find it a really odd idea. Like you, I mean, the complexities will be off the chart. You're talking about defining what is UK and how you can do that. When you do that, I mean, I just don't understand how it would work. It almost felt like you have to be like a post relief charge, because how would you know where it's going before it went, and then how
absolutely
you get the tax relief and then move it somewhere? So it would have to be something within the pension wrapper as a charge that somebody would have to administer in some way. It just feels like an easy talking point. I was about to use a different word, but it feels like an easy talking point to say, okay, we want you to invest in this way. We can't force you to. I mean, the mandation thing is going to try, but it's almost like, well, let's try and make people lead the horse to water, kind of, I don't know, whatever the analogy is, just try and make it work by making it affect people. And then people go, oh no, pension scheme, you must invest my money into UK assets. And as you were talking about, the tax relief is there. You get the tax relief on the way in and you pay tax on the way out, but the tax relief is there to make you want to put that money away for 40 years. So because you can't get it. What's the advantage in putting in a pension if one of the big ones is that deferred tax? Then why would you do it? So it just makes a complete mockery of the whole thing. I just think it's the most nonsensical. And not to think about all the impacts on markets themselves. If you start saying that UK pension funds are all going to be investing in UK assets in this particular way, it will distort the market. It's an over the politicization of pensions, and I think it's a nonsense, an absolute nonsense.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, if we look at the outcomes as well, bringing it back to that interim report from the Pensions Commission recently, tax relief is important, but by far the biggest determinant of somebody having a good sized pension fund at the end is the investment returns. So if we can get better investment returns investing not necessarily in the UK, pension funds should still continue to do it. So it's a non-starter for me personally.
Yeah, that's a nicer way of saying nonsense. Non-starter. It sounds similar, but it is that like it is that point though around getting money in. I mean, tax relief. Okay, there's a debate to be had maybe about tax relief and how we give it and who we give it to. And I accept there's two sides of the argument, around the higher rate relief and all this kind of stuff. Again, I think it's a non. I don't think it's a good argument to try to create a kind of flat relief, but there is an argument there. But that's fine to have it if we want what we want to do. But as you say, it's investing in the right way, and trustees and providers have that duty to make sure that the members' best interests are served by the outcome of those investment returns. And if you start trying to, I don't know, to falsely create this market where we invest in this way, again, it's an economist thing. Economists look at these pension schemes and see all this money being invested in ways they don't like, and trying to force it in a particular way. No, not on our watch, Adam. Not on our
No,
watch.
no, quite right. Let's put a stop to that.
Okay, Adam, another one for you, I think primarily, which is around the sale of UK annuities has risen sharply, as being reported in the FT here, kind of reading it. Basically, going up more than quadrupled from the same period in 2024 to this period in 2025. I think this is being reported here. So, what are the reasons for that, do you think?
And I think increase sharp quadruple. That's one big increase, isn't it? And one of the big interesting things within that is it's not just the small ones either. Annuities of over £1 million doubled within that period over the last couple of, if we're comparing it to a couple of years ago. Why is this? Part of you might think, well, if people think that they're going to have to pay inheritance tax on funds if they were going to be taking them by drawdown, that might be why. Changing that behaviour, that might be part of it. But actually, there's something a bit more interesting in there as well. In this FT article, reading about regular gifts from annuity income, so surplus income, can be gifted exempt of death duty as well. So it is quite interesting to see. Maybe when that legislation was considered, one of the things that wasn't maybe considered in depth was actually the people who are likely to have inheritance tax issues are probably going to be taking advice. And advisors, they could identify kind of gaps, these kind of loopholes, these ways for people to think, right, I don't want to see inheritance tax or a significant amount of inheritance tax charged against this money. What can I do to address this? And that's an example of it.
Well, I don't know. It feels like this is the point. It feels like this is the policy was meant to stop people sitting on great wedges and trying to pass it on tax free. But if you convert it to an income, you're paying tax on it. So it feels like even if if you're giving it as surplus income, then that's fine. That kind of gets around the IHT rules, lovely. But you've already paid income tax on that to get it around anyway. So it feels like the Treasury's having their cake and eating it there. It feels like the policy is working, and these loopholes might feel like loopholes because they reduce the likelihood of inheritance tax. I suppose for the bigger funds, the £1 million funds, that is definitely what they're doing. That is what they're doing. Is converting to an income. Lovely. Treasury will be very happy.
Yeah, so still tax income, but just perhaps with a different name, essentially.
Yeah, and sooner now, not having to wait for the person to pass away either. So, and then the bank of mum and dad keeps bankrolling, keeps moving. People, if that's what it's for, to help people get on property ladders and move on with their lives. Again, that's lovely. That's good, and I feel quite happy about that. I feel like people should be giving. If you've got a large estate, you can, rather than wait to die and pass it on, give it to your children when they're younger, when they'll actually have more of an impact on their lives. And you can see the impact it's having on them. You can go and have a barbecue around their house that you helped them buy. What a lovely afternoon. What a lovely thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually being used at that point rather than many years in the future.
Yeah, when you're less likely to need it. Yeah.
Final one for us this week, Dave. We were thinking about state pension communication strategy. Now, I know we've kind of seen mistakes happen in the relatively recent past with respect to people's awareness of changes to state pension. Can you give us a bit more information on this?
Yeah, so the DWP have done a report into, that was a tongue twister, DWP have done a report into how they're going to communicate future state pension changes in response to the Parliamentary Health and Service Ombudsman. who did a report into the WASPI issue. That's the women born in the 50s who had their state pension age increased. Well, the announcement for that was in 1995, but obviously it moved through into the late 90s and early 2000s and causing some controversy. So that controversy is largely, well, it's never going to go away, but I think that's kind of dealt with now. But I think they do have to address how they talk about this stuff. So the report goes through talking about how they're going to publicise future changes to the level of state pension and when it can come into payment. And that's great. And I think it's really good to see that they're taking the bull by the horns and setting out how they're going to do that. I think it's really important. A big thing that's really important there for me is if we're talking about pensioner poverty and people who are struggling when they're ceasing work, then the awareness of pensions credit and housing benefit, those things are really important. They do get mentioned in there. I'd like to see them boosted a bit more. We had a campaign a couple of years ago where government really tried to push the level of pensions credit. That was around the winter fuel allowance, and that was going to get tied to whether you received pensions credit. And we did see an uptick, but that's gone down again. The level of claims has gone back down again, and is plateauing. And there's still billions not being claimed by people who could be claiming it. And that's a huge part of the pension poverty thing for me. I think there's some failings, and I take some inspiration from Simon Grover at Quiet Room, who did a LinkedIn post about this. And I think he's a bit concerned that there isn't a bit more user testing. The level of understanding is it's very much we're going to do this and this is going to make things better, but doesn't seem to be that stage of finding out what people know, finding out how people like to be communicated with, and then finding out about them so you can communicate with them where they are, rather than coming back from position. And I would say that's probably a problem with government in the past. They do just tend to say on broadcast mode, rather than I think they should probably do a little bit more listening to see what people need and understand, and then we can communicate with them more effectively.
I think you're right. Any communication needs to be targeted so it hits the right people in the right way. If you feel that you're just getting kind of a broadcast almost, as you say, you're probably going to be less likely to actually take action or increase your understanding. Absolutely right.
Yeah. The taking action is the key point as well. People need to take action. It's either finding out your state pension, finding out when your state pension is going to begin, how you claim it, all the rest of it. That's the action you want. You want people to be claiming what they're due, planning when they're going to retire, and knowing what the outcome is going to be, rather than just, there's another leaflet in the post, that's going to go in the bin, or another email in the inbox, or that's going to go in the junk folder. How do you make sure people actually read this stuff and understand it?
I think people could be forgiven when you're thinking about state pension. Well, we all get that, don't we? I don't have to do anything. So, totally right. That communication needs to be a lot stronger. If there's something that we need to do, we need to know how to do it. It needs to be straightforward and easy, because we're talking about people with all different kind of backgrounds here as well, aren't we? So it just needs to be really easy and straightforward for us to do. But we need to know if we've got to do something. Because at the moment, there's an assumption out there that we don't. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Really, really good to talk through those mainly kind of policy issues and considerations. Look forward to seeing you again next time.